The Church of Scientology, one of the largest and richest new religious movements, is being sued for $1 billion by former members for fraud and breach of trust. They regard Scientology as a dangerous cult. Yet the church goes on expanding, making converts, and claiming it is the road to total freedom. St Hill Manor in West Sussex, the British headquarters of the worldwide Church of Scientology, where parishioners study the works of L. Ron Hubbard and undergo a form of psychotherapy called auditing. Scientologists everywhere claim benefits from the techniques Hubbard called Dianetics and point to their success in curing drug addiction. The church's headquarters are in Los Angeles, where its leadership proclaims its message.
Scientology is a tool that people can use in their life to achieve their dreams and their goals. It can help people find work when they can't seem to find any. It can help people eliminate stress in their life. It can help people become more self-confident. And with these tools, people can achieve their dreams. And you know something? 6 million people around the world that consider Dianetics and Scientology to be their religion have found that it has helped them do that.
In Britain, Harold and Mary Clark see it differently. They feel they have lost their 24-year-old daughter Ruth to Scientology. Since joining the church, their daughter has broken with her family and become a stranger.
My daughter has changed so completely as a result of being in Scientology that we now no longer know the person she has become. Whereas she was a happy, loving, sparkling girl whom it was a joy to have about the house, she's now become a cold automaton who can't think outside the mental straitjacket that she's in because of Scientology.
I don't believe how evil Scientology can be.
Ruth Clark worked here with other young people at Scientology's London shop, one of 20 Dianetic centres in Britain. Like other new religious movements, such as the Moonies, Scientology has been accused of wildly exaggerating its membership, using mind control techniques to extort high fees, and breaking up families. But these movements nearly always operate within the law. Last year, her family actually kidnapped Ruth Clark and took her back home, but could not alter her beliefs. Ruth escaped from Norfolk and returned to the Scientologists and the teachings of Lafayette Ron Hubbard. Cyril Vosper describes himself as a deprogrammer. Families with grown-up children in the new religions ask him to try to change their minds. When Mr. and Mrs. Clark kidnapped their daughter Ruth, Vosper was sent for. He failed then, but with many others has succeeded. An ex-Scientologist himself, he brings his understanding of their methods to his deprogramming sessions.
How much money have you spent altogether in Scientology?
About £2,000.
How long did it take them to get the £2,000 out of you?
No, about 3 days.
About 3 days? Yeah. That's good going, isn't it? And what was your rate of...
Scientology has been vindictive towards ex-members, hence this girl's request for anonymity. Vosper has witnessed a proliferation of what he sees as religious cults, but in his view, the most dangerous of them is Scientology.
I think it's probably the worst because it's the biggest and it's got more money. It's been around longer than the other ones have, and therefore it's got its act together better. And I think it basically should be stopped, but it won't be stopped in the United Kingdom. The government here and the authorities here don't appear to give a damn.
In Los Angeles, the leaders of Scientology dismiss Cyril Vosper's critical views by attacking him personally.
Poor Mr. Vosper is a man who left his wife, left his children, refused to support them, left many debts. The church took up the wife's cause, took up the children, so forth. Mr. Vosper is also a known kidnapper. Individuals, if you choose to call it deprogramming, I think the word is more a question of kidnapping for profit.
We're talking about adults.
Yes.
People like myself, Reverend Gents, people like John Travolta, Chick Corea, Karen Black, Nicky Hopkins, the 6 million Scientologists across the world that have found in Dianetics a solution to their problems. We're talking about adults. This is not Nazi Germany. And what happened there should have taught us a lesson. And that is that man has a right to believe as they choose. And the 6 million Jews that were killed should have been enough of a lesson that we should have learned that by this time man should at least have the conscience to allow other people to believe as they choose. Adults. And that's what we're talking about, is adults. And we're talking about a terrorism that was perpetrated by Mr. Vosper that is unconscionable.
Scientology today is a multi-million-dollar business. Dianetics are the psychological techniques invented by its founder. They promise enhanced intelligence and better health, and thus Scientology became a huge commercial success in America, where people yearn to improve themselves. But the initiation process is unusual. Becoming a Scientologist entails undergoing a series of training drills designed to instill confidence and obedience.
Stand up!
Acknowledge it as loudly as you can.
Thank you!
Command it as loudly as you can.
Sit down on that chair!
Good. Acknowledge it as loudly as you can.
Thank you!
Good. Command it as loudly.
These ex-Scientologists are demonstrating the drill of shouting orders at an inanimate object to develop what they call intention. The mark of a good Scientologist, wrote L. Ron Hubbard, is a fixed, dedicated glare. That look must be maintained even through the drill they call bull baiting, having to listen to a barrage of insults. If the subject reacts in any way, she flunks or fails.
You make me so mad, I'm not going to drink my tea. Not good. Fun.
Laugh. Start.
Well, I fell down.
In this drill, the wired-up tin cans detect the electric charge in the subject's hands.
And there I was screaming and crying, and my mother came out of the house. And
The so-called auditor can discover those topics that excite or upset the subject from the needle on a galvanometer that Scientologists call the E-meter. By pursuing those topics, the auditor can make the subject talk about suppressed fears or worries. That produces a feeling of gratitude and euphoria. Session will follow session, and dependency is created. It is a perfectly genuine, if crude, form of psychotherapy. Scientologists even talk through experiences they believe they had in past lives, as they approach the condition known as clear.
my abilities to handle life are better. I'm not subject anymore to bad feelings of the past, see? Auditing help you to get rid of that bad feelings of the past and be able to feel in present time and confront the future and live a better life. That's what I get out of this.
But auditing is largely administered by people unqualified outside Scientology, and there's deep antagonism between Scientologists and professional psychiatrists. Dr. Louis Jolyon West is one who is deeply skeptical about auditing's value.
What good does a session with the E-meter do?
The E-meter doesn't do anything. If you buy one, you can be sure you paid too much for it. The E-meter is a gadget used by the purveyors of hocus pocus to make what they do and say seem respectable because here's a piece of machinery plugged into the wall.
Doesn't the needle genuinely represent a moment's emotional charge, say, in the subject?
The needle moves back and forth as the electrical changes in the skin take place, and all sorts of things can cause them to fluctuate, like a hunger pang, or a need to go to the bathroom, or an intrusive thought about someplace else you'd rather be, or a bit of bad breath on the part of the auditor who's bending over you, or a twinge of guilt on account of what you just said. If you can't sort that out, then whether or not you have an E-meter, I would say, makes no difference at all.
Scientology was accused of practicing psychiatry without a license. In 1954, it became a church and adopted the costumes and titles of Christian ministers.
It was a real farce, if you will. I was in there. I had to become ordained. I mean, I was Reverend Franklin Friedman, but I mean, I never used it in any religious manner. In the church, it's a big joke. I mean, they joke about it all the time, how they fool the public thinking that we're a religion, etc., etc. It was LRH's idea to do that. The purpose was to give the public the image that this was a church. And the Scientology organization is the farthest thing from a church I've ever seen.
But it's called itself a church since the 1950s, and its founder is treated with religious devotion. Most new religious movements have a guru and author of their sacred texts, and Hubbard is Scientology's. The church stands by all the claims he made about himself. He was a science fiction writer who reportedly quoted George Orwell in saying that if a man wants to make $1 million, he should start his own religion. Where his past was undistinguished, Hubbard invented a more impressive life story, making himself a nuclear physicist and decorated war hero. As Dianetics is supposed to make one healthy, he concealed his many illnesses. In the late 60s, Hubbard took to the high seas in an old Channel ferry called the Apollo.
I don't think you could make anything out of that, like Hubbard kills people in Mac.
Scientology was becoming increasingly unpopular with several governments. On the Apollo, Hubbard created Scientology's elite, the Sea Organization, or org, complete with naval ranks and uniforms. Its members signed contracts lasting 1 billion years, and military discipline prevailed, with harsh punishments for those who offended against the founders' rules or ethics. Hubbard called himself the Commodore, and was waited upon by a hand-picked team of teenage girls known as the Commodore's Messengers. Dee Dee Reisdorf became their commanding officer.
I was actually born into Scientology. When I was 13, we joined the Sea Org. The whole idea of being in the Sea Org is that you were the ones who were here to make the world a safe place. The Sea Org was special. There was what we called the WOG world.
The what?
The WOG world.
What did that mean?
Anything and anybody who wasn't involved with Scientology was the WOG world. What now I like to call the real world. But at that point, that was what, we considered people out there as the WOG world.
Another girl sailor was Hannah Whitfield. She was able to observe Hubbard's character in close detail.
There were two distinct sides to him. One was an incredibly compassionate side. He was a very understanding, rather humanitarian man at times. The other side was what I would call bordering on, it's not a popular word, but bordering on insane or psychotic. He would go into mad, screaming rages where he would be bellowing at the top of his lungs, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours on and off. I've actually seen that.
Do you ever think that you might be quite mad?
Oh, yes. The one man in the world who never believes he's mad is a madman.
Hubbard spent most of the last 10 years in hiding in America. Only a few close aides knew where he was.
At 2000 hours, Friday, the 24th of January, 1986, L. Ron Hubbard discarded the body he had used in this lifetime for 74 years, 10 months, and 11 days. The body he had used to facilitate his existence in this universe had ceased to be useful, and in fact had become an impediment to the work he now must do outside its confines. The being we knew as L. Ron Hubbard still exists. Although you may feel grief, understand that he did not and does not now. He has simply moved on to his next step. LRH, in fact, used this lifetime in the body we knew to accomplish what no man has ever accomplished. He unlocked the mysteries of life and gave us the tools so that we could free ourselves and our fellow man.
Those were the words of the church's official announcement of Hubbard's death last year. When alive, Hubbard claimed he had visited heaven twice, and the second time found it shabby. His Scientology funeral service was one he had written.
And now here, lift up your eyes and say to him, goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Our dear Ron.
Goodbye. We'll miss you, you know.
Hubbard had signed a new will the day before he died, insisting that he be cremated at once and the ashes scattered at sea. The fate of his vast but secret fortune was also murky, but power had passed to the young followers who were with him at the end.
I'd like all of you now to join us in singing Happy Birthday to Ron.
One of those heirs is the Master of Ceremonies here, David Miscavige.
By Mr. John Travolta.
Although Hubbard is dead, this was his memorial birthday celebration last month, an opportunity for the church to parade its star members and salute the late founder. Scientology presents a confident image as it marches forward to clear the planet, as it says, and offer the only road to total freedom. But the church can also be secretive and defensive. You are yourself photographed if you photograph its buildings. Investigations by various government agencies have over the years created something of a siege mentality. In the late 70s, 11 top Scientologists were imprisoned for burglary, robbing American government offices of files. In one of his bulletins, Hubbard instructed church members, don't ever defend, always attack. Since Scientologists consider themselves the exclusive possessors of the secrets of the universe, anyone outside the church tends to be deemed hostile, or, as they say, suppressive. And we were no exception. Why do you think this guy's taking our picture?
Oh, because they're going to use it against us later on, supposedly.
Why is he taking photographs of us? He should take another picture.
Ron Hubbard says if you take their picture or something, you can use it against them, or maybe people are intimidated by the picture taking, you know? They were taking my pictures all the time.
Scientology reserves a special distrust for the media. Members may not give interviews without the church's permission. Despite a long-standing invitation, our interview with the church's chosen spokesman was granted only when they were convinced that this program would be broadcast without their participation. When we taped that interview, the church had its own cameras rigged to video us.
More fundamentally,
Scientologists dressed in the style of Christian ministers witnessed the proceedings. American Judge Paul Breckenridge said in a recent judgment, the organization clearly is schizophrenic and paranoid, and this bizarre combination seems to be a reflection of its founder, LRH.
Mr. Breckenridge is not the first one to say that. A man by the name of Paul Dickhoff disseminated it first, SS number 337259, an SS officer in the Nazi intelligence systems who was the head of the Bundeskriminalamt, the German federal police, in 1970. And the head of Interpol, as a matter of fact. I do not support a Nazi's supposed right to disseminate that kind of thing.
But, Mr. Judge, you regard your enemies as the CIA, the IRS, the FBI, MI6, MI5, just about every government.
Surely I'm on the
paranoia
IRS
is a
enemies
mild
list.
expression for the church's attitude to its supposed enemies.
You know, our enemies are ignorance, drugs, corruption, criminality, and insanity.
But those the church seems to regard as its worst enemies are its most recent defectors, especially those with damaging stories to tell. Near the Canadian border lives Don Larson, who ran the church's so-called finance police.
I was a hatchet man for this financial dictator. If you could force someone to be scared enough in the church, they would cough up the money that you wanted. And it was my job to scare people.
What methods did you use?
Extortion, force, threats, duress.
Larson was there when David Miscavige and the new regime took over.
The old management was just chopped, and new management was put in its place. And its motto was, we make no deals with anybody. We're tough, we're ruthless, no deals. There was about 15 of us. We went out and rented 3 limos, drove up to an organization in San Francisco, and did a practice beat-em-up kind of meeting, you know. Took the CDO, the commanding officer of that organization. He got thrown into the filing cabinets. He was sec-checked on a meter, and people. That's where you have to tell the truth. And there's a whole row of people around the guy, right? And he's sitting there hanging on to the cans, and this has nothing to do with religion anymore, right? This is, where's the money, Jack? I want the money. Where did you put the money? And he's saying, I don't know. I don't have the money. So David Miscavige comes up, grabs him by the tie, and starts bashing him into the filing cabinets. Then he's thrown out in the street. His tie is ripped off. This is just a warm-up kind of bash.
Some of those who left the church sued for restitution of the fees they had paid. Whenever there were court hearings, the church mounted spectacular protest demonstrations. This one was in Sacramento. Scientology maintains that an ex-member suing the church for fraud is an attack on religious freedom, and even some Christian churches spoke out in its support. The big names were there too.
It's worked for me for 10 years, and it's worked for thousands, millions of people, and I just feel that nothing can and should threaten that.
But courts found against the church. Last year, one ex-Scientologist was awarded $30 million damages. The church is appealing. This party in Los Angeles is to launch a $1 billion class action, that is, a collective lawsuit, against the Church of Scientology. The plaintiff's attorney is Lawrence Levy.
Different levels before we found out what any other religion was.
Over 400 ex-Scientologists, some living in Britain, have combined to sue the church for restitution of their fees and to stop what they allege is church harassment. The lawsuit has a long way to go through the courts and may indeed fail, but it's an expression of these embittered ex-members' anger and resentment. The lawyer they've retained, Lawrence Levy, has won similar cases against other religions.
That's been displayed by the church. More lies, more subterfuge, more machinations that do everything except address the truth. What is the truth? If you join Scientology right up until yesterday, you've been defrauded.
Mrs. Thea Greenberg is what Scientologists call a squirrel. She uses some of Hubbard's techniques for personal gain. So some Scientologists came to one of her meetings.
All of a sudden they came up with their finger up on me in the middle, and on one of my friends stayed here, and I said, "You homosexual faggot!" And some concentrated on him, and the other, "You old woman psycho." After they had left in the first time insulting us, I hear all of a sudden, while they were talking to us, cluck, cluck, cluck. I thought, what is that? And when they had left, we looked at the eggs all over, and my house was covered with eggs, the windows. And so they must have had about 30, 40 eggs to throw at the house. And a few months later, I had a visitor here staying in this room, and he comes up in my bedroom in the middle of the night and said, "For God's sake, come down immediately. There are thousands of maggots here." And they were thrown at this door, and they were all thrown against the door and all over, thousands of them. Oh, disgusting, absolutely disgusting.
In 1967, Hubbard wrote his notorious order about church enemies. If you stay within the law, they are, he said, fair game. They may be deprived of property, injured by any means, tricked, sued, lied to, or destroyed. Last year, this official-looking wanted poster was widely distributed in Los Angeles, giving the names and home addresses of ex-members who had angered the church.
The posters existed in a context, and that context was years of harassment, dirty tricks, frame-ups of people, and we felt we were now on the enemies list. We were now fair game. And if they were willing to do this publicly, totally disgusting and outrageous activity, what were they doing to us that we didn't know about? And we went on a very long period of just extreme fear.
From Lansky, and Heller.
Litigation is no novelty for the Scientologists, who make habitual use of the courts. But the church says Lawrence Levy is a church-busting mercenary for representing its ex-members in the class action.
I'm not a church-busting mercenary. I think, if anything, I'm a religionist. I believe that any individual has the absolute right to believe whatever they want. What I take issue with is people who would utilize religion as a money-making venture and not as a religion. I'm not interested in their beliefs. I'm interested in their conduct.
It has defrauded its members. It has lied to them. Lies have been passed on by Hubbard about his background, and the church has condoned those and passed those on. The church has broken up families, forced parents apart, forced children and parents apart. It has also broken the priest-penitent confidentiality practice quite severely.
Do you feel you yourself were deceived by this church which you served for so long?
Oh, definitely. On several counts.
Every Scientologist is required to recruit new members. Find their ruin was Hubbard's advice. In other words, detect a personal problem that might be alleviated by a course of auditing. But sometimes recruitment is more indirect. Everywhere, Scientology reaches the public through its front organizations, some of them misleadingly named. Some are pressure groups campaigning on issues like mental health, which seems to obsess Scientologists. Others are controversial campaigns aimed at school children. And Scientology has others to help the unfortunate, like ex-offenders, and particularly drug users.
Narconon is a drug rehabilitation center. It's a front group for Scientology. It's designed to help people get off drugs, which it does successfully, but then it converts people from that into Scientology. They're taken off drugs. They're put onto a program to help them do better in life. The program is basically Scientology processing or training, and from there they are indoctrinated, and from there they're converted to a Scientologist.
And how many of those former drug addicts become Scientologists?
Anywhere from 50 to 75%.
Can you recall an incident which occurred when your mother looked younger?
Yeah, when she...
One of the main grievances of the plaintiffs in the class action relates to auditing. The most intimate confessions are sometimes divulged in these sessions, and the auditor notes them down. This information is then kept in processing files known as pre-clear or PC folders, which are carefully stored. The use that has been made of the contents of these folders is now a matter of contention. Hubbard wrote in What is Scientology, "The auditor treats all session reports as confidential." Item 22 of the auditor's code reads, "I promise never to use the secrets of a pre-clear divulged in session for punishment or personal gain." What is the policy of the Church on the use of information imparted during auditing sessions?
It is to be kept completely confidential and sequestered.
Completely confidential?
Yes.
Is that policy rigorously observed?
Yes, it is.
Has it been?
Yes. Has it been rigorously observed? Absolutely.
But in the recent past, it was policy to cull people's files for damaging information. Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue, who was later imprisoned, wrote a Guardian order in 1969 to make full use of all files on the organization to affect your major target. These include processing files. You were in the intelligence division of the Guardian's office of the Church of Scientology. Did you have access to people's personal confidential files?
Oh, certainly, certainly.
And was use ever made of that information?
Every mission that I ever went on, I used it.
What did you do?
Well, when we'd first come into an organization, we would have the pretty clear folders of people that were involved in the organization that had maybe given the organization some trouble, pulled and culled for things that they may have done and were hiding. And that information would be brought to their attention in order to kind of bring them back into the fold, so to speak.
Did you use confidential information that the Church held about people?
Yes. For example, that was used to get the extortion money with, a lot of times.
Are you categorically denying that private information culled from PC folders has ever been disseminated to intimidate or blackmail ex-members of the Church of Scientology?
Absolutely, because that can be verified in every court of law in the world, and it's just as simple as that. So there will be allegations that people want $1 billion. I understand that they want $1 billion, but they'll have to come up with some kind of documentation. There is none. There is none. Nada, as they say in Spanish, niente, as they say in Italian. There's nothing.
But one of the class action plaintiffs has some widely circulated internal church documents that, she says, were seized by the FBI and authenticated in court.
Here you have a file on a woman. The following data was gotten from this woman's folders. She had several self-induced abortions. She saw a psychiatrist for alcoholism problems. She has a drug history of Librium, Valium, Milltown's alcohol, LSD, opium, heroin, and many other things. That her son went to jail. And in another case here, a woman, it says here, her folders start in 1963. She masturbated regularly since she was 8 years old. She mentioned doing it once with coffee grounds and once had a puppy licker. When she lived in Greenwich Village, she claimed she screwed anything with pants.
Now, this information was supplied in confidence in auditing sessions.
You can believe it.
The Church would say that It has wound up the Guardian's office. It has changed a lot of the practices that went on in previous years. It has now cleaned up its act. Is the Church of Scientology today a different organization from the one you left?
It's worse. I know this because people come to me continuously and bring me the stories of the horrors that they're going through in present time up to even a few weeks ago. The Church has a history of every time they're called to account, they say, oh, that was in the past. We've dismissed those people. We don't do that anymore. It can be called a catechism of the Church. We don't do that anymore. They do it, and more, as they'll do it as much as they can get away with.
In California, Ludus Burse is another former Scientologist whose troubles began when he left the church last year.
Several months after I got out, they started sending people around to get me to sign a confession. 2 and 3 of them at a time. One of them was this big guy, about 6'6", and I don't know, it just freaked me out.
After you refused to sign the confession, what was the next stage?
I got a phone call from a private investigator who worked for John Peterson, a Scientology attorney, and he said if I didn't come and meet with him to sign this confession, that he would go to the immigration authorities and get me kicked out of the country over some discrepancies, as he called them, in my immigration status.
So they had some fairly private information about your past?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Where do you think they got it from?
Yeah. Well, this was some private investigator, just some voice on the phone. He got it from my confessional folders, which I had told to my Scientology so-called minister about 15 years before that. That's the only person I ever told about that.
This 1972 directive that the FBI seized is a frank statement of one of Hubbard's aims. Item A, make money. Down the list, item J also reads, make money. Item K, make more money. And item L, make other people produce so as to make money. The place where the Church of Scientology offers its higher level courses, and therefore takes the most money, is here in Clearwater, Florida. This headquarters they call FLAG, where Scientologists from all over the world come to buy the so-called upper levels. The converted hotel is where Hubbard's elite Sea Org came ashore. The functionaries are as likely to be dressed as naval officers as priests. Scientologists usually join the staff if they cannot afford the fees to take the courses for free. But despite their snappy uniforms, most are paid very meagre wages. Here the staff administers the esoteric programs of auditing that Hubbard went on writing right up to his death. And it's a highly profitable activity. Scientologists have to go up the bridge. That is, take a series of courses, each more expensive than the last. The midpoint is called clear. After that, you progress through the upper levels that can cost up to £600 an hour. How do you think Hubbard succeeded in getting so many thousands of people to take his courses and to go on taking extra courses and spending more and more money?
First one's free, second one costs you. It's like an extended sting operation. At first you get lots more than you ever thought that you were going to get, and real changes take place in your life. But as you go up the so-called bridge, you no longer get the benefits, and then you're told it's because of things that you've done in your past, wrongs that you've committed against mankind. And of course, you have to sign up for more auditing to find those things and handle them.
The upper-level courses are called OT, which stands for Operating Thetan, Hubbard's word for the spirit. The OT levels are supposedly so powerful that you can die of pneumonia if you're exposed to them unprepared. It costs around £5,000 to take OT3, which contains Hubbard's cosmology. The Church has tried to keep this material secret, but former senior Scientologists in America have leaked it, and versions have been published. This is an outline of the story.
75 million years ago, this planet was called Tigyac. There were 90 planets in this sector called the Galactic Confederation.
This is part of the text of a Hubbard lecture.
They had elected a fellow by the name of Zemu to the supreme ruler, and they were about to unelect him. And he took the last moments he had in office to really goof the floof. Zemu decided to take radical measures to overcome the population problem. Beings were captured on other planets and flown to locations near 10 volcanoes or more on Earth. H-bombs were dropped on the volcanoes, destroying the bodies of the beings who, as thetans, attached themselves to one another as clusters. A revolt followed of the loyal officers against Xemu. Xemu was locked up in an electronic mountain fortress and remains there still. Since that time, beings born on this planet have had clusters of thetans attached to their bodies. OT3 can run out these clusters and cause them to leave us and reincarnate as individuals.
After hours of expensive auditing, you are rid of the body thetans attached to you. You may then acquire psychic powers, move objects at a distance, and have out-of-body experiences. If you find you can't, then you must take the course again, for another £5,000. Ex-Scientologist Frank Notaro used the name Xenu in a demonstration outside a church building and got beaten up. Why is it so secret?
Because Ron says that if people find out about this information, that they will get sick and die if they find out this information without paying the money.
Well, did anybody who read your T-shirt get sick or die?
The only person who got sick was me because I got beat up. Stun gun. So, well, I just want people to find out about what's been going on and what the church is really all about.
L. Ron Hubbard and the church he founded spent money extravagantly, buying expensive properties on a whim. He built this Folly, a landlocked clipper ship, at the film studio he bought in the California desert. Here he directed films about Scientology. Hubbard died at a remote but magnificent ranch he bought further up the coast. Many ordinary Scientologists knew nothing of all this.
They were told that this money was going for charitable purposes to help and benefit mankind. And the money was being used for illegal and criminal activities, to hire people to go through their confidential files and send people out to harass. And they would not have paid such very high fees if they had known the money was being used for this. They were being lied to, not so much about the gains and promises of the techniques, which is not an issue here, but the use the money was being put to and the purposes of the organization.
What Your Fees Buy was issued in the 70s. Hubbard claimed he was as badly paid as any staff member and categorically stated, "The fees you pay do not go to me." But a succession of Hubbard's former staffers have testified that this was untrue. For example, one of his youthful messengers, Doreen Gillam, used to manage his finances. She was sent to demand $600,000 in cash.
I got it from Sea Org Reserves, which is church money, and I red flagged on that because Hubbard usually didn't, at that point, like to obtain church funds directly. So, but I justified it thinking, well, if it's for renovations, he's probably buying another property for us. We had already purchased 2 huge properties in 4 years. Why not another?
But you were taking money from church funds,
yes, sir,
for Hubbard's personal use.
Yes, sir.
In recent American court cases, former Hubbard aides have sworn that he put money into personal accounts through a shell company called the Religious Research Foundation, which was registered in Liberia. Money brought by Scientologists to the headquarters at Clearwater, Florida, was paid straight into the RRF's account in Toronto, Canada. From there, it was transferred to secret accounts in Luxembourg and Liechtenstein, which Hubbard dipped into whenever he needed cash. His aides have testified that the accounts contained over $200 million. What made you leave the church?
The fact that I had gone all around the world in various organizations and I knew that monies were being used not for the benefit of mankind or the parishioners of the church, but for the benefit of Ron Hubbard and his minions.
Scientology in America has a complex web of overlapping companies, which make it difficult for the tax authorities to find out where all the money goes. The church's ex-members say that in reality there's just one corporation. And, they say, the outfit that finally controls the assets and money of the non-profit Church of Scientology is the for-profit company Author Services Incorporated. This senior ex-Scientologist had close knowledge of Author Services Incorporated, or ASI. So what is the fundamental purpose of ASI?
The fundamental purpose of it is to acquire large amounts of money, gross income, as they refer to it, for L. Ron Hubbard's private accounts.
And where does that money come from?
It comes from the churches and the missions of Scientology, and it comes from the public at large.
And the churches and the missions are supposedly non-profit organizations. Is ASI a non-profit organization?
No, ASI is specifically a profit-making corporation.
And it was, in fact, Hubbard's private fortune.
Yes, I suppose it is. Yes, that's true.
So what has happened to Hubbard's fortune? Only a small and secretive group of his followers knows the real answer, and they aren't saying. But we do know that in the church hierarchy, they've come out on top. Those who appear to have the power in Scientology today are Norman Starkey, a South African whom Hubbard appointed trustee of his estate, David Miscavige, still in his 20s, who ran Author Services Incorporated, Annie Broker. It was she and her third husband, Pat Broker, who looked after Hubbard in his final hideout. Of these, David Miscavige is believed to be the most powerful figure.
He's a macho guy, a real, he does bow and arrow practice shooting rifles, he does karate. He's a very macho 1950s. He's a tough guy. He will keep power till his last gasping breath. That's David Miscavige in a nutshell.
L. Ron Hubbard spent years avoiding writ servers, and his heirs are doing the same, usually staying out of sight. The church's front man is Heber Jensch, its international president. Jensch is a former actor who had a bit part in Paint Your Wagon. He has the enthusiasm of a fundamentalist preacher. Although Scientology makes millions of dollars, it is still run by fanatical believers. How much is this church worth, Mr. Jensch? You have been quoted as giving it a value of $1 billion in a recent interview. Is that a correct figure?
Is that all?
How much is it worth?
I would say that my church is worth an inestimable amount that would run into the trillions and trillions of dollars.
I'm talking about its real estate, its money, its assets.
I'm talking about its spiritual assets, which are far greater than any kind of asset that I could possibly put a monetary figure on.
I'm sure that's the case, but what is the monetary figure for its physical assets?
Well, I think that the church is worth, it would be put in the Fortune 500 of America as a major corporation. It would fit in that category. Again, it's priceless.
Now the church has bought an ocean-going liner, an echo of Hubbard's maritime wanderings. Scientology. To thousands, it's the only road to total freedom. To many with their own experience of the church, it's just a cruel hoax.
I think it's a scam. I think it's a con. I think it's a psychological warfare started by Hubbard on the world that he perceives as being peopled by nothing but his enemies.
Mr. Hubbard said Scientology is the road to total freedom. It's there, it's a path, it's mapped out, and people can take that road or not take that road. But it's available to them.
It makes me very angry to think that that sort of thing can flourish in my country. And it makes me unspeakably sad to the point of tears when I see what they've done to my daughter.
Mr. Hubbard is a man, obviously, who is loved, adored. I think he has more friends in the world than any man I've ever met. Any man I know of right now living today. They respect him, they love him, and they like his works.